What the hell do you mean by the Nazi past of Smogon, you might ask me? Trust me, I was as shocked as you are to find out there was anything Nazi related to Smogon. Well, any hopes I had of monetizing this one are off the window now. You know, I was trying to go for the feel-good videos, talking about queer joy, Pokémon, a series for kids, light-hearted and family-friendly, but, well, the internet is a terrible place and here I am forced to talk about the German Chancellor of 1933. But I cannot not talk about this. I just learned about the story and I'm in shock. My Discord channel is also in shock. And the most shocking thing of all is that everyone that I keep bringing this up to had absolutely no idea about it. Come on, why can't I be the YouTuber who does Nuzlocke and shiny hunts and get cute plushes in the mail? Why aren't there any other videos online about this? Does it need to be me? Oh, the burden of responsibility. The sword of Damocles is hanging over my head. If no one else will do it, then leave it to the queer Latina, right? So, dear stranger online, did you know that the Smogon forum started off as a gas chamber joke? Also, trigger warning here for literal Nazi stuff. Let's go, hear me out. If you're a bit lost, Smogon is a forum dedicated to competitive Pokémon. Probably one of the biggest and oldest Pokémon forums still active. I will keep it short because I'm not in the mood, but it's the most important fan resource for competitive Pokémon Online, which has for decades set up the stage for multiple competitions, deciding over community rule sets like Smogon OU, separating Pokémon in tiers, and allowing different formats to be enjoyed by different people. Smogon is essential for the competitive Pokémon scene and the forums are diverse places where people who love this franchise can discuss strategies and get to know like-minded people. However, when the forum first opened in 2004, it looked very different from what it does today. And honestly, I don't know if I can show Smogon's original logo on YouTube without having this video taken down. But if I blur it out, it's because you are watching a re-upload. Here it goes. This was Smogon's homepage in 2004. Take a second to let it sink. Yeah, forums in the 2000s, right? So whimsical. Smogon is Koffing's name in German, and with this logo, the natural assumption is to say this is all an absolutely disgusting joke about the poison gas Pokémon. Down here, we have two boards that summarize very well what this community was. The first one is called Pokémon Strategy in General, cool, and the second one, which I assume is an off-topic thread, is called Smogon's Great Nazi Empire. This is all preserved thanks to the Internet Archive, which also let me time travel through Smogon a little bit more. In 2005, they removed the inconspicuous logo, but the board, The Return of Smogon's Great Nazi Empire, was still there. The description read, "Please, Hayo." Can I even say this on YouTube? I don't even know, I'm sorry, but what the fuck is this? When I used the Internet Archive to see what was being discussed there, we can find great threads like how to get pity sex and an open letter to Lindsay Lohan and I am a racist apparently. Yeah, I know, it's shitposting, ha ha ha, they triggered the lib back from 2005, but this is really disturbing and I really think that someone at Smogon should at least speak up about this. And so they have. Stop making video games political, guys, I'm trying, okay? This took so long to surface because Smogon was hosted under a different domain in 2004, and it was only last year that this screenshot appeared online and was brought to the attention of Finchinator, who is Smogon's OU leader, and honestly, wasn't even a part of the community when this all went down. He was as surprised as I was. Having this brought up in his timeline, Finch became basically the spokesperson for the entire situation, even though he arguably has nothing to do with it. Finch wrote, "I joined Smogon in 2011, 7 years after it began, and just found out today about the origins. I also am not in charge of the whole community. I just run one tier and my involvement besides that has dwindled. Speaking as someone who is Jewish, I am not amused by the origins at all. With that in mind, I don't think Smogon is inherently anti-Semitic or that changing the name this many years after the fact will help anything. Best takeaway is that e-culture used to be and oftentimes still can be damaging and insensitive. We needed to and still need to be better. Anti-Semitism online is something that's terrible and I have dealt with it repeatedly. But a lot of it is just misguided angry online teenagers or trolls who don't know better. That's not to minimize it, but rather to say that I prefer confronting the issue and reforming people. There are some people who are just genuinely anti-Semitic to their core, and they are entirely irredeemable. Shame on all of them and what they've done. Smogon is not that. After this, apparently, he took the discussion to the admins of Smogon, and this is what he said afterward. I spoke with a lot of people in the hierarchy of Smogon tonight and confirmed that the community takes the fight on bigotry, anti-Semitism included, very seriously. There is nothing anti-Semitic or bigoted about the current Smogon community or appearance. I am Jewish and had questions, but I am satisfied with the detailed response provided. I am not going to respond to any more further DMs or comments I have not gotten to yet today because it was already beyond draining enduring this whole thing throughout the workday as is. Well, fair, he is satisfied, but I'm not sure if I am. This entire discussion lasted for about 2 days on Twitter, and after both these messages from Finch, it was fully over. Page turned, let's move on. And it was completely successful because this happened last year and most people, including me, never even heard about this story until a few days ago. I'm not here to question Finch and his personal views, but I don't think this is a situation that I can just look past, and frankly, why is someone who wasn't even involved in the website's creation having to do the explaining? I took a look inside the Smogon forums, and after a quick research, I didn't find a single statement by Chaos, the owner of Smogon. There wasn't even a single thread on the forums discussing the screenshot. Chaos' account was created in 2004, and being credited as the founder, I'm quite positive he must have been directly involved in the creation of the Smogon Great Nazi Empire board. I understand the moderators and staff have drastically changed in the past 20 years, but I don't think it is okay to just write it off as an old joke if we still didn't even hear from the person who made the joke. If that person is still the owner of the most important community in competitive Pokémon. If Koffing, which is quite literally the joke itself, is still the name and logo of Smogon. What the hell is this? Hi, dear stranger online. Hope you're doing well. It's been a rough couple of months. This one here's a biggie, right? Really tricky. Hope I'm not biting more than what I can chew. What you watched this far was the part of the script I wrote immediately after coming across Smogon's 2004 homepage, after Vita, a subscriber of the channel, sent it my way, like 3 months ago now. It was my immediate reaction of shock, of not knowing how to elaborate, not even knowing from which angle to approach this entire situation, not even knowing what I wanted to do this video for. What you watched were just my unfiltered first thoughts after learning this, and I decided to keep it that way so that you would have someone to go together through the weird catharsis that is finding this out. However, I have been reflecting on this entire story for a while. Is it even worth telling? What do I want this video to do, really? Should we stir the hornet's nest for a joke that happened 20 years ago to demand answers from people who are probably very different than they were back then? Like, this definitely doesn't align with the current values of Smogon at all. If you look through their channels, you will find charity streams raising money to support organizations dedicated to fighting racism and police brutality, for example. Very un-Nazi behavior. What do I want to get out of this video? Is it just me stirring up drama? Everybody moved on so quickly from the subject. This was discussed for a couple of days on Twitter, and then it was fine. No topics were created on Smogon that I could find. There were only 10 messages or so about this on the Smogon Discord. This conversation barely happened. Can I be overreacting? Everyone agreed it was just a joke, a bad one, that was made 20 years ago, but we are way too past it for it to be any relevant. And I reached out to Finch, and we talked for a bit. He told me, among other things, that everyone in Smogon he talked to universally agrees that the joke is bad, and part of old internet culture. Smogon's modern brand is innocent and largely detached from its origin. That as a Jewish person who is not a part of Smogon administration, he has been critical of some topics in the past, but these people are most definitely not anti-Semites. And after having spoken to people who were directly involved in the creation of the forum, Finch does not view it as a big story or issue. He says an appropriate response was provided from him and to whoever else approached staff at the time. If they sorted it out amongst themselves, shouldn't I just let go? Turn the page? Well, who am I kidding, dear stranger online? You can see the length of this video. And I still feel that out of every single reaction I could have after hearing this story, silence must be the worst call to make. Silence in front of swastikas has been, historically, not good for people like me. I think I should at least tell this story in detail, register it, if you will, because you won't find it anywhere without a lot of research. You will not get the full picture without doing what I did and spending a few hours digging through old posts in the Internet Archive. Again, the only time this was addressed was through 2 Twitter threads. Chaos never created a single post on the forums to talk about it. The only person within Smogon publicly speaking about the situation was 4 or 5 years old when it all happened. This is also a person who clearly loves Smogon deeply, a good but flawed community, as he said, proud of how progressive it has been in defending causes through charity bowls or empowering LGBTQ members. A community where many adults and teens engage within serious competitive pursuits, passion projects, and fandom interests. And I am being as careful as I can when writing the script, because I would never want to attack work like that. Work that is made purely voluntarily by passionate people. The last thing I want to do is to start a witch hunt, but unfortunately this kind of did happen. All that I'm talking about is public, and I think that this passionate community also deserves to know about it. There are a few things you don't joke about. The mass extermination of Jewish, queer, Romani, and people of color is one of them. At this moment in history where the shadow of fascism looms closer and closer each day, the least I can do is to document this story, even if just as a glimpse into what early internet culture was like. In today's video, I will tell you everything I could find about Smogon's early days. I will compile this story to make it easily findable. I also want to explore some deeper questions. Why would you want to joke about something like that? Why is there a seeming obsession from some people about jokingly dressing up as a Nazi? Finch said in his tweets about Swastika Koffing not being hate, it was just misguided, angry online teenagers or trolls who don't know better. In this video, I want to explore also why angry teenagers find mass extermination and ethnical cleansing as amusing as they do. And where does Swastika Koffing stops being just a joke? Is this clown a real clown or just someone dressed as a clown? For starters, I want to say that not a single Pokémon fan in my Discord server knew about the story. Smogon users that I mentioned this to have never heard about it. It's not mentioned on their Bulbapedia page. There's nothing online about it, other than a Reddit post. Not a single YouTube video, nothing. Not even some controversial PokeTubers who are very well known for hating Smogon have brought this up. I wonder why. So I dug up some stuff, and here's what I found. Since Chaos didn't speak out about it, I tried to go for other interviews he might have given about the creation of Smogon. I found this one on the Smogon webpage itself. He says, I like to trace our roots back to around 2001, when Pokémon was primarily played on IRC. For you Zoomers out there, IRC is like Millennial Discord. Our elite core of old schoolers date from around that time period, some before, like how JK and IS are from 98-99. Around November 2004, some people from Tafop, a net battle server, wanted to start a Pokémon site. Gladly, FM, Vinion was there, I think. We asked for names and such. That's where the infamous quote from Paper Fairy is from. Pokémon Grand Central Station for all your battling desires. After belittling him and eventually abandoning him, we went with the name Smogon, the German name for Koffing, which was Azure Heights' mascot. Since I was the only person there who had a clue about making websites, I became the leader of the group. Smogon was put up December 17, 2004, and the forums opened the 18th. Originally, Smogon was just a Pokédex written by Brain and a PHP BB board with 2 forums. Oh, how we've grown. A PHP board with 2 forums? Huh? Which 2 forums? Can you tell us which 2 forums? There are a few interesting things about this interview that I would like to go over. First, the dates. He talks about the idea for Smogon happening around November, and the publishing dates for the forums being December 17 and 18. Earlier in this video, I show you that his account was indeed created on December 18, 2004, but something's not clicking here. For starters, the screen cap from the Internet Archive is from October. Maybe the forum wasn't live by October, maybe it was just a beta build for his friends. Well, we can see that in October 2004, while Smogon looked like this, there were already 127 registered users and 325 posts on Smogon's Pokémon board, which sounds like a lot of people and posts for a forum that was still under development. Also, there were over 3,000 posts made under Smogon's Great Nazi Empire, which means that users back then were at least 10 times more interested in their Great Empire than in Pokémon. Odd, right? Something else the snapshot tells us. Most users ever online was on August. Despite what Chaos said here, as we will see later in the video, many other people claim that Smogon was actually created in May 2004. In December, the forum looked like this. While the Koffing was gone, the Nazi Empire was there, so I'm still not sure if it's a great starting date, but it's the one that Chaos gave us. If there was a mix-up in the dates, or if he just wanted to avoid people looking that far back into Smogon's past, I really cannot say. Something else that comes up often here is the statement that we went with the name Smogon, the German name for Koffing, which was Azure Heights' mascot. Some other people also brought this up, and Finch talked about this in his thread. I went with the Wayback Machine in Azure Heights back to the year 2000, and yes, Koffing is there. You know who is also there? A lot of other Pokémon such as Chansey and Porygon. You know what's not on Azure Heights Koffing? A Swastika. Also, not a single Nazi joke to be found in Azure Heights. The only thing I found was calling Magikarp Magic Crap, so yeah. When the screenshot was widely shared last year, one of the few messages about it on the Smogon Discord was from user RBGobat. They wrote that Koffing has been the unofficial mascot of competitive Pokémon since the beginning. The furthest I can trace back its lineage is Azure Heights, which was basically the precursor to Smogon. When we decided on a mascot for Smogon, we went with what we knew best. The reason we used the German word for Koffing is super immature. We never planned for Smogon to be a huge influential website. When we created it in May 2004, it was just a forum for people who attended the main competitive Pokémon IRC channel, #RS. One of our in-jokes at the time was mocking Nazis, and Smogon was part of it. So that became the name of the first forum, and it stuck. I actually don't remember who came up with the name Smogon. My guess is a fellow named Brulux, who was one of the first administrators. Too long, didn't read, I don't know, we were super edgy teenagers. Such edgy, such teenage. Also, I find it hard to swallow that having a Koffing with a swastika, the subtitle Heil Smogon, and the forum Smogon's Great Nazi Empire was somehow mocking Nazis? Which leads me to something interesting I also found. Back in 2014, Chaos hosted an AMA thread on Reddit. He has deleted his Reddit account since, which renders most of this thread useless, but there is one reply here that caught my attention. The question was deleted, but I believe it is about the origin of the name Smogon. There is a message from user Brulux, the same username that RBGobat mentioned in his Discord post. Brulux wrote, I confirm I came up with the name. Originally, it was a trolling device, a piece of Koffing ASCII art that we would flood Cerebee's IRC channel with. Not my brightest moment, I must say. Then, it became a forum for IRC regulars, then it became what we know it for. Koffing was a trolling device. If you don't know, ASCII art are those drawings people make on text boxes using typing characters. usually used to spam unmoderated chat rooms in the early days of the internet. Since he mentioned it was used for trolling, I first assumed that they were spamming Cerebi servers with Swastika Koffings. Then I emailed Cerebi's Joe Merrick to ask about this. He said he doesn't remember and doesn't have logs to check. Joe did say that there was always light trolling between the other sites and us. With all this said, dear stranger online, I want to paint the picture of this entire story to you. A group of edgy teenagers in the early 2000s who love talking about Pokémon on IRC chats. They are funny, they are trolls, so they like spamming these chats with Koffings because of Azure Heights, I guess? Then, they create their own forum with the poison gas Pokémon sporting a swastika and the subtitle Heil Smogon as their banner. The German name here was just to mock Nazis. The board has 2 forums and hundreds of users. One of them called Pokémon Strategy in General, and the other one, with many more posts, was Smogon's Great Nazi Empire. Such a nice environment. I wonder which kind of cool kids were visiting Smogon back in the day. User Misty on Smogon Discord wrote that. As someone who was there, I can confirm there were very few actual Nazis. I cannot confirm there were no Nazis because, yeah, shit happens. In this post from 2013, where people were questioning why Koffing is the mascot and if it should be changed, one user replies, "The drug and Nazi communities of Smogon also appreciate a mascot that can relate to our everyday struggle." After 11 years, this comment was never deleted or received any kind of warning. And Chaos replied later down in the same post. When I spoke to Finch, he told me that Chaos did talk directly to him about the situation when he was writing the Twitter threads, and he guaranteed me that Chaos is not an anti-Semite. He also told me that he is not in the most public-facing position. He has a lot going on in real life and he carries a ton of behind-the-scene burdens with him along the way. And I am really taking Finch's word here because, again, I never spoke to this person, but I can assume here that at least there was a very complicated sense of humor and even tolerance for this kind of discourse going on. I also found this nice team building post from 2010 where a user made a very cool and creative competitive Nazi team, nicknaming his Pokémon after Himmler, Eva Braun, Goebbels, and Hitler. Again, the post is still available and online in the Smogon forums, and the user never received a single warning about it. What worries me as well is the possibility that Koffing, which is a nice Pokémon, a friend, if you will, could have been co-opted and used as a dog whistle for, well, exactly what it was originally used for. Taking into account that self-proclaimed Nazis were frequenting these forums at some point, the semiotics here are really important. Here, I would like to quote an instructional video from the Old Testament ContraPoints.
Nazis have always taken an interest in occult symbols like the black sun on Fritz's ring or like the swastika itself, but more obscure symbols can be useful as a kind of secret handshake that lets Nazis recognize each other without normies taking notice. Better still are symbols that, until adoption by fascists, are completely innocuous. Modern fascists have taken to using almost arbitrary emoji as a way to wink and nod at each other, notably the frog, after Pepe, the milk, and the OK sign. And of course, another advantage of using innocuous symbols is that when leftists try to point those symbols out, the fascists can always say, "These gullible SJWs now think that even the OK sign is racist. Is there anything they don't think is racist?" And the gullible centrists will be taken right in.
The fact that Koffing stayed in the logo for over 20 years, even without the swastika, could show OG users of the forum who might have liked it that way, that they were still welcome there and that this is still the Smogon they knew. I also recommend this ContraPoints video as a complimentary watch after this, as Natalie also goes over the idea of being a Nazi as a joke, which I will explore as well in a second. So, what do I think? I'm really torn here personally. I do believe Smogon is a very different community today than it was back then. It's run by completely different people, has a completely different approach, and honestly, feels like a totally different website. I wholeheartedly believe what Finch said here about the current Smogon community taking the fight on bigotry, anti-Semitism included, very seriously. But the silence is honestly deafening, and the approach of not talking about it sounds a bit like trying to hide the past, in my opinion. To ignore it, I'm not here vouching to change the name or the logo or anything. Although, if after everything I said you're still able to see Smogon's Koffing without feeling a small ick, then wow. But I really believe that more people should know about this, and also that maybe we should have a more serious conversation about it. Other than, too long didn't read, I don't know, we were edgy teenagers. Because if your forum is, again, called Smogon's Great Nazi Empire, there are two types of people frequenting your forum. One is teenagers who like to make dark jokes. The other is... The internet in the 2000s was very different. 2004 was the dawn of 4chan, and this kind of online behavior was a little bit normalized in some spaces. A friend of mine, Clara, reminded me of the Habu Hotel raids, which, if you don't know, was a hotel chat room aimed at children, which made it a perfect target for these kinds of attacks. In 2006, according to Wikipedia, a meme began circulating on 4chan boards regarding racist conduct by Habu moderators and arbitrary banning of players with darker-skinned avatars. As a result, users signed up to the Habu site dressed in avatars of a black man wearing a grey suit and an afro hairstyle with blocked entry to the pool, declaring that it was closed due to AIDS, flooding the site with internet sayings and forming swastika-like formations. And who honestly finds this funny? Other than, of course, YouTube's most famous plagiarist, the internet historian. This is baffling to me, honestly. You leave teenagers unsupervised online for 10 seconds and boom, they all start talking about the wonders of the Third Reich. You think that a free and anonymized internet is going to produce borderless journalism and a strong democracy, but instead, kids start getting weirdly into phrenology. Why? And hear me, I understand the appeal of taboo to teenagers. I know what it means to be edgy. To be in the phase in your life where you want to rebel and do stuff that you're not supposed to do. This desire is what Sigmund here called the death drive, or thanatos, a compulsion toward destruction and chaos. And I remember those years online, where the fact that the internet itself existed, and it wasn't regulated and nothing was a crime was, in itself, a rebel yell. This was our space. That's when organizations like Anonymous flourished and the Arab Spring began. We have our own rules, and governments and parents and authorities have no say over what happens in our anonymous networks. I get it. I understand that the appeal to make a dark joke is not because I agree with the darkness. The appeal is that it's forbidden. And that's how it starts. Here, we can joke about things that we are not even supposed to talk about. And yes, talking about the Holocaust might trump all other taboos in the edgy teenager scale. But there needs to be something more, right? The joke is always Hitler. It's hardly ever Mussolini and basically never Hirohito. There is a fascination with the swastika that basically seduces these teenagers and puts them in online spaces where talking about this is fine. And hear me, you will have very few productive conversations in a space where a swastika is fine. And that's where the danger lies. A swastika in itself isn't dangerous. The uniforms, the salute, the symbols of fascism are just symbols. It is, really, outside of any context, just a joke. And something we keep forgetting is that fascism isn't bad because swastika bad or because Hitler evil. Fascism is bad because fascist politics are built upon fear of the other, on division, and capitalizes on extremizing the inequalities produced by the capital. The problem is that an online environment that tolerates swastikas will often tolerate conversations about white supremacy, about phrenology, about Chads and Stacys, about Kakistan, about how to get PD sex, about ethnostates, and about forced sterilization. The problem with fascism isn't its aesthetic, it's its policy. But aesthetic invites a conversation about policy, and tolerance of aesthetics often leads to tolerance of a discourse that only gets more and more extreme. If the swastika is fine, what else is fine? I don't need to give you examples of the horrible things chants have done over the last few decades online. And don't get me wrong, this has started by tolerating jokes, by getting seduced by a mystifying look of a villain, of a bad guy. And that's all part of the plan. Well, dear stranger online, you have to admit one thing. If there is one thing that fascism knows how to do, is keeping up a hypnotizing aesthetic. It's enthralling and seductive, Nazi soldiers wear slick, black Hugo Boss-made uniforms. Fascists get hyper-focused on Buddhist symbols and revolutionize moving pictures through groundbreaking cinema techniques just to show white people on a screen. In my university professor's favorite essay, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, Walter Benjamin already talked about how cinema and moving pictures are the perfect medium for the fascist message. Benjamin writes that the result of fascism is the introduction of aesthetics into political life, and there are no other art forms in the history of humanity that can convey the fascist aesthetic of a military parade, of a Führer speech, of the glory of war better than moving pictures. Not music, not literature, not paintings. And in the last 100 years, much more than music, literature, or paintings, we, and edgy teenagers have been building an image of reality and the world around us, mostly through moving pictures. TV and cinema are our culture's main contact with the outside world. Looks kind of are everything. They build our understanding of the world. The fascist look is seductive, and no one has ever gotten more seduced by it than the United States Hollywood machine. It's no wonder that edgy teenagers tend to get obsessed with Nazi imagery. The narratives they are spoon-fed daily also are. From their Star Wars to their Tarantino, from Taika Waititi to the de-aged Harrison Ford. US cinema is obsessed with the look of fascism. Petra Hau, a German researcher about war literature, talks about this in Our Nazis, Representations of Fascism in Contemporary Literature and Film. The argument is that for the US and Britain, the past is like a foreign country. Just like the colonies for the British, exotic, faraway lands which are looked at with morbid curiosity. Keep in mind this is written pre-Trump, but precisely because American and mainland British culture have no experience of fascism or any other form of totalitarianism or dictatorship that could be retrieved through family history, testimony, or recollection, the only way to access it is by engaging another country's history. Fascism is as exotic and exoticized as the Orient or Africa, barbarous, strange, alien, and equally eroticized and glamorized in its otherness. The result of this process is an appropriation that furnishes a cultural fantasy. Paradoxically, the Nazis have gradually become our Nazis. She calls it our Nazis because, of course, this fascist imagery doesn't belong to historians anymore. It belongs to Hollywood. And belonging to Hollywood, Nazis are first and foremost a product of consumption. So yeah, it is clear that edgy teenagers will be drawn by that kind of aesthetic. In Hollywood, Nazis are as archetypically evil as the big bad wolf. They play the exact same role. In Indiana Jones or in Star Wars, they are not evil because of Nazi politics. They are evil because they wear uniforms and do a salute. And as this is the Cecily channel, I need to talk also about gender, and how the fascination with the rituals and symbols of fascism are directly linked to masculinity and its multiple crises, mostly for teenage boys. Howe writes that fascism shows as a violent response to a crisis of masculinity after the First World War, a fending off of feminized culture and politics, of democratic chaos. Freikorps militancy and fascist politics literally became a form of acting out male fantasies. Many authors, such as Susan Sontag, have talked about these power fantasies in an almost psychoanalytic way, as a form to act out something that's inside. In this case, the turn-on lies in what fascism enables one to do, the abdication of responsibility and the release of repression. And it is also the insistence of Hollywood to make a spectacle out of fascism, to display their flags and speeches and Germans shouting, these mass events and iconography that glamorize authority, control, and the idea of a powerful, charismatic leader dominating a submissive, feminine mass of followers, that is part of the issue. Because it's an aesthetic that is designed at its core to allure mostly young men. This is done on purpose by the fascists, and Western moving pictures are interested in amplifying that, instead of creating media that actively critiques and analyzes what is actually fascist politics, why it is bad, and why we should avoid it. It's because of this that we run away when we see a swastika, but keep voting for people who have really similar government plans to the National Socialists in 1933 Germany. And yes, teenagers want to be different and edgy and play with taboos and thanatos even though they know they are not supposed to, but again, by allowing this aesthetic to flourish, by tolerating them in an online forum, you are also creating fertile ground for this young man to start questioning if fascist ideas are even really that bad. And the people who are going to answer those questions are people who are super into swastikas. And when dealing with this kind of people, it is important for us not to be naive. It is well documented that literal fascists and neo-Nazis will actively hide themselves under the cover of being Nazis as an edgy joke, and strategically transform these spaces into recruiting ground. It is strongly in the interest of fascists that you think they are just joking. Then they can open a communication channel with you, earn your trust, shift your overtone window of what is acceptable, and start talking about white ethno-states. All of these texts and theories were suggested to me by a friend called Tavos Silva, who is a World War II literature scholar. He's a former member of one of my favorite YouTube channels, Mimimidjas, and they have an amazing video about this difference between fascist aesthetic and fascist politics that I will link in the description of this video. Tavos and I had a brief conversation about this entire situation, and he did ask a few interesting questions which I will here paraphrase. He asked, up until which point these repressed desires of dressing up as a Nazi in a controlled and anonymous environment, even as a joke, isn't actually a really solid social impulse for real fascism. You know, this almost erotic urge for domination we just talked about. Or, to put it simply, is Koffing with a swastika just edgy humor? Or is it a way to avoid the fact that maybe, who knows, there is some social hatred deep inside of you? And yeah, maybe the solution to the country's problems is to get rid of the immigrants, or to stop people from transitioning. Because that's exactly what happened in the Chans. Not only 4chan, but many other image boards as well. They all started as fully anonymous communities, and then it was funny to be edgy and joke about things you shouldn't. And then from funny it became seductive. And then you join the group and you start to dress up as a Nazi too. Until the people in the forum start to talk about more and more extreme ideas and attract more and more extreme people. And you know the rest of the story. You know how many mass shootings and lolcows and doxings and attempts to destroy people's lives started in those communities. It reached up to this point, but it started as an edgy joke, a Habbo Hotel joke, an ASAI art joke. It was quite literally the same thing. Until it was not. Trust me when I tell you, in 2004, Smogon was heading down the chance path. And then something changed. Smogon changed, slowly, quite slowly really, but silently. Yes, Koffing was still there, reminding old members where this community came from, but something happened to Smogon that almost always destroys fascism. And I think here is where I figure out what this video is about. This is not a video about past mistakes of a Pokémon community. This is a video about a community that managed to escape from the edgy Nazi trap. A community that managed to steer towards a different path. What did Smogon do that prevented it from becoming a community for extremists? And can we learn something from it to apply to the communities around us today? Well, Smogon got more diverse. It had different people from different backgrounds joining and shaping it up. The Pokémon community, being as queer and neurodiverse and widely different as it is what healed Smogon. That's what kills fascism. Diversity. It is hard to advocate for exclusion, for an ethno-states, or for a group to be exterminated when people from the group you hate are also super into Pokémon and want to talk about the game they love. And exchanging competitive tips and telling their stories, the diversity of the Pokémon community is what took down Smogon's great Nazi empire and turned this online space into somewhere where fundraisers for queer people are being held. Campaigns against police brutality, against racism. We have the power to change communities just by claiming our spaces in them, by existing, by being loud and being proud, and that is fucking amazing. But this is, again, a change that happened really slowly and silently, and I would even argue, passively. This conversation was never had, and people never heard of this. The difference between Smogon now and Smogon then is so stark that whenever somebody hears this story, they are caught completely by surprise. People get outraged, as they should. It's what happened to me in the first lines I wrote for this video. And this happens because never knew how close we were to never having Smogon as it is, to how close this community was to becoming the Chan of Pokemon. I know there is an actual Pokemon page on 4chan, but that's for another time. Today, I want to focus on the butterfly effect somewhere in the past that changed the path of Smogon forever. And I believe it is thanks to us. This is how we beat fascism, by being loud, by talking about it, by finger pointing, yes, by demanding explanations, and by registering history so that it never, ever happens again. By existing as queer, existing as Jewish, existing as autistic, existing as someone who will not stay silent when they see a swastika. But more important than that, to not stay silent when they see dog whistles and really, really harmful fascist discourse that is disguised as just a joke. I kind of really didn't want to be the one writing this. I know a lot of people will get angry at me at a point in my YouTube journey where I was really starting to make connections and meet people I really admire. The Pokemon company is definitely not going to be thrilled that I put up a video online with these words in the title. A lot of people will want to stay away from me to stay away from complications to their own brands. I talked to a lot of people and asked for insights, and this is the kind of subject that any content creator would stay away from. That's why there are no other videos on it. I gain very little for working this hard to put this video out. But the problem is that the alternative is to see a swastika and stay silent. To see fascism and try to ignore it. Historically, that has been not good for people like me. It has been horrible for other minorities as well. And I think this conversation now is as important as ever, mostly given recent events all over the world you are very well aware of. Because Nazism is not a Germany problem, it threatens us all. Fascism always lurks by, it's always in heat. It's always looking for targets to drive hatred towards, to exterminate. From the 40s to the 80s, no one knows better than queer people that silence equals death. Silence in front of fascism, even joke fascism, is what creates gas chambers and mass shooters. Please don't get angry at me for needing to have this conversation, for wanting at least to document this as carefully as I could. I hold the highest respect and I'm grateful for the role today's Smogon holds in the Pokemon community. But I kinda want to hear from people who were actually involved in it. Historical Nazism and online forum Nazism has made too many people suffer for me not to say that we need to talk about it.